Our Regent Peak team is honored to have the opportunity to meet some really interesting individuals who we feel have a unique life story to tell. It's one of the reasons we decided to create this series, Peak Performers. We want to share their stories because we found their creativity, drive, and dedication are motivating. We know everyone is busy, and we wanted to keep these interviews moving, so there are only 5 questions. We hope these interviews you hear today will inspire you to become a peak performer. So let's go. Hello again, Craig Robson, founding principal and managing director of Regent Peak Wealth Advisors. Today I have the good fortune of introducing Blake Patton, who's also a founder and managing general partner of Tech Square Ventures, an early stage venture capital strategy right here in Atlanta, Georgia. Some unique things about Tech Square Ventures. First, they develop local relationships with universities and corporations in helping those founding partners, those entrepreneurs, in what they really need most, which is that kind of go-to market strategy. And then second, by finding and identifying intentionally that homegrown talent, they're really helping these founders with what they all need most, which is introductions to capital, into the markets, and of course, basically access to customers. I was introduced to Blake by a mutual friend who had already invested in his fund, and the more I learned about both Blake and the Tech Square Ventures story, I became really interested. So with that, Blake, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. So as I kind of mentioned in the intro, really fascinating that you found this gap, right? And in my words, the gap being that we have these talented individuals, and historically, what would happen is, right, when they're ready for that go-to market strategy, when they're looking for those resources, they typically would go to Silicon Valley, New York City, Chicago. I'm telling you the story, of course. Yet for you to identify that and then really solve for that is pretty amazing. So what was maybe the catalyst for that?
Yeah, well, I spent most of my career as one of those entrepreneurs, building high growth tech companies, and then was just really fortunate to spend some time as the interim director at ATDC, the startup incubator down at Georgia Tech, where I got to work with all these amazing entrepreneurs and just had this front row seat and really saw this momentum in this region. You know, I'm a big believer in the Southeast. I think it's the fastest growing innovation region in the country right now. So I saw that, but I also heard the entrepreneurs talk about how difficult it was, for them to find the capital they needed. And so as an entrepreneur, I saw that as a need and opportunity and launched Tech Square Ventures. And like you said, having been a former entrepreneur, I realized that what they needed even more than capital was access to customers and markets. So we've tried to build our whole platform around that concept and around helping them get to market faster.
I wish you all the success, so really excited to see.
Thank you. Thanks for the support.
You bet. So as you know, we don't have a lot of time today, but there's some questions I'd really like to ask you. So if you're ready, let's dig right into it.
Dive in.
Okay, so kind of looking backwards. So Blake, it doesn't have to be your first job or your first role, but maybe a role way back when that helped shape you in terms of what you're doing today, and how so?
Well, I guess my first jobs, right, as a teenager, I worked in a textile factory, an ice cream parlor, but kind of settled in on lifeguarding and swim coaching. And those are great first jobs because, not many jobs at that age give you that much responsibility. So I think that helped shape both work ethic and kind of gave me this head start on, building teams and leadership and all that. And then in college, I went to school at Georgia Tech, and I was there from '89 to '93. So in '91, Atlanta won the bid for the Olympics, and I had this, I got this job in the summer at Georgia Tech doing what they called after-use programming. And so my job was to go basically research the requirements for the space and how it would be used before, during, and after the Olympic Games. So, for the natatorium, how much square footage is needed for drug testing during the games, and then how much classroom space is going to be used, after the games, et cetera. And so I didn't really realize it then, but that was, I was really being taught customer discovery, right? Go figure out what the customer needs before you build it. So that had a huge impact. And then, but my first professional job out of college, I went to work for SEI, which is a publicly traded asset management company, first in their IT department in Philadelphia, and later in the capital markets group in New York. And the reason I say that in context to your question is not so much exactly what I did at the job, but it was the perfect vantage point in the early '90s to recognize, the emergence of the internet. I would go home at night, play around, log in $8.95 an hour with AOL, play on the internet. And and just realize this is the same data, same information, right, that I was accessing at work on the Bloomberg and Nexus terminals, and just the light bulb went off for me that the internet was going to change how we lived and worked, and that really launched. I wanted to be part of that, and that that really launched my entrepreneurial career. So I think those first jobs both shaped a little bit of who I am, but also shaped the direction of my career.
It's amazing to look back at those first jobs and not knowing, right, how impactful they could be, right?
Exactly.
So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So staying on this kind of theme of maybe looking backwards a little. So, we all have one or two or maybe a handful of individuals that really have shaped who we are today. And so whether it's personally or professionally or some combination of both, share with us maybe one or two individuals that have had a really impact on you and why.
If I've had one, outsized blessing in my life, it seems like that's it. I've just had. It would sound like I'm at the Academy Awards if I tried to name them all. I've just been so blessed with so many amazing people that have helped shape me, who I am personally, and also, career-wise. From a career perspective, I'll too many to name, but I'll name one group that really impacted me. So in college, I met the then president of Georgia Tech at this athletic event, and and he wound up inviting me to be one of the first 6 students on the president's advisory board at Georgia Tech. And so this advisory board was full of like prominent alumni, right? Like CEOs of, major corporations, luminaries like Andrew Young, just so 19 years old, I'm surrounded by this caliber of people. And it was really the first time in my life I'd been surrounded by, those kind of leaders and people thinking big. And when they talked about plans, they were planning for 10 or 25 years in the future. And so, I saw that, and I wanted to be like those leaders. And I think looking back, that group first, that was where I started thinking bigger about what was possible in my life and my career. But also the relationships I formed in that are some of the people that when I say there's too many to listen, some of those people, that first job I mentioned, SEI. I went to work for one of the CEOs on that board, and there's several people from that board that have continued to help me to this day in my career.
So let's, from one engineer to another. So we probably could both agree we like to test things before we kind of go big and implement. That said, if we didn't have to or didn't choose to, and we look backwards and could kind of replay all the things we've learned in our life, and maybe take it from a professional perspective, or you could go personal, what are one or two things in hindsight you would have done differently if you had that knowledge capital today?
Yeah. It's a dangerous question because sort of on a deeper level, I think about those things, and I recognize that all those experiences led me to where I am today, and I love where I am today. So I'm not sure I would actually change anything for fear that I would change where I wound up. But a couple things. I think the first thing was I would tell my younger self is learn to sell. And so, as you said, from one engineer to another, as a Georgia Tech student and an engineer, I just thought of, I built things. I thought of myself as someone who built things, and I thought of selling as something you hired someone to do. And then as I got out into my career, quickly learned, right, that even building things is about selling, right? If you're building a company, it's about telling a great story and attracting great employees, right? Selling to customers, partners, whatever. So that was a lesson I was slow to learn. That's probably one that I would change, is to go back and focus on that. But the big one for me, and I'm not really sure, how to pinpoint what exactly I would have changed earlier or where it would have changed. But looking back, growing up in college, I didn't really have a plan. I was just competitive, right? So everything was just about a scoreboard. Get the best grades, fastest time in swimming, right? Success in business. And I was focused on the what, not the why. And so it seems like kind of age-old wisdom that we all hear, and I don't know. You just have to get out there and live to learn it. But no surprise, right? You finally figure out that's not that fulfilling, not the best path to success. And so for me, it wasn't until kind of my mid-30s where all that came together, career experiences, faith. I think being an entrepreneur, you, no matter succeed or fail, you sort of repeatedly wind up unemployed, right? And you sit around and you have to figure out who am I, what am I doing, what do I want to do next? So finally I figured out or started focusing more and realizing that for me what kind of lit me up was this combination of serving others, and so I started practicing more servant leadership in the way I thought about and what I was going to do in building things. But still with that scoreboard, right? Still, right. How do you put points on the scoreboard for the family? So if I could go back, I think I would, earlier in my life, say, hey, look more for the why and making the decisions on what you do and how you do it.
All right, so I've kind of had you go backwards in these questions, so let's go forward. So share with me and our audience something that you're working on right now, which is really exciting, innovative, something that maybe you haven't shared with the public yet, and you're really excited to kind of build or to introduce. Yeah,
for what we do, every new investment is that. Right, what you just said, every single new investment is that. It's a new idea, a new entrepreneur's dream, and you're thinking through the what could be, and so we get to kind of experience that on an ongoing basis. And we just launched our second early stage fund, so that's kind of my new focus. And the reason that may seem obvious, but the reason it's so much fun at this stage and feels like a new initiative is that you're actually building the portfolio of companies that are going to go into that fund, right? And you're sort of building the group of companies you're going to spend the next 10 years trying to grow and nurture. So right now, that's the excitement for us. And then, not necessarily new but a little bit maybe what folks don't realize is, in Atlanta, folks know about our Engage program where we've partnered with these 15 large corporations and Georgia Tech. And built this sort of unique collaborative innovation program and startup accelerator that helps companies with their go-to-market. And so everyone kind of sees that and sees the work we do with the startups. What's really exciting is the work we're doing that people don't see. It's the work we do with the corporations. And so we've recently put in place these working groups where we're bringing executives from across these enterprises together around topics that we care about, like supply chain, et cetera. And so these working groups where we get to hear from the market leaders, what's going on, and especially in environments like today in the markets, right? It's incredibly valuable to, when as conditions change, to have that insight. So I'm so excited about, this is kind of a, secret weapon, competitive advantage where we get to really get in the minds of the customers, the people we're hoping, to be customers, the companies we're investing in. And then use those insights, right, to drive a more market-led investing approach. So this working group concept is working. So, tell me where else in the country, executives from across 15 companies, are getting together regularly and sharing with each other, right? They value what they get out of is cross-corporate learning, right? They get access to these amazing startups and that are impacting their innovation roadmaps. It's helping the region, put the region on the map. So all of that, all the work together, it's not different than what I'm doing now. What I'm doing is every day is a new exciting initiative.
Well, that's awesome. So look, I can hear the excitement in your voice in terms of all the things you're working on and doing. So, as we finish out here, my final question for you is, if you couldn't perform in these roles you do today, and you either chose to or had to do something different, what would that different thing or opportunities, what would that look like?
Yeah, well, probably the honest answer is I would do what I did before I did this, right? I spent most of I didn't know this is what I wanted to do. I had to, I didn't discover that till my 40s. So I spent most of my career as an entrepreneur building high growth companies. And I loved building companies, building teams. And so honestly, I'd probably go back and do that. But thinking outside the box and outside the industry, I'd probably be either, Professor Patton or Coach Patton. I teach an entrepreneurial finance class at Tech once a year as a professor of the practice, and I love that. And then, I think a really cool intersection of what I've figured out lights me up, this intersection of service plus a scoreboard, would be coaching. And so as a swimmer, right, I think, I used to coach summer league swim teams, as a teenager in the summers. And, and that was a lot of fun. So doing that at a higher level, I think would give me that service and scoreboard. So maybe I'd be a swim coach. I love what I do now. I get to, our core values of our firm are service and stewardship, right? No surprise from the questions you've asked. But what I love about what I do, and when I started the firm, I told my wife, right, hey, I can do what the Bible says and love and serve others, and we can still put points on the scoreboard for the family. This is perfect, and that really is what it feels like. It's so much fun to help these entrepreneurs, realize their dreams. It's the investment element of it. When you're successful, right, is very rewarding. So, truth is, I think I'm in a chapter of my career where I'm blessed to get to go do that other thing that I would do if I could.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So look, as we wrap up another session of Peak Performers, my commitment to each of you is to continue to find really interesting individuals with unique stories across varying backgrounds. And I would say Blake Patton certainly checks that box. So with that, I just want to say thank you for your time today, and thank you for being a Peak Performer.
Absolutely. Thanks for your support.
Thank you again for listening to this latest episode of Peak Performers. Our wish for each of you, in your own personal way, is that this conversation inspires you to keep climbing.